The orbital bazaar of Zenthis Prime pulsed with life beneath the swirling violet haze of the nebula of size. 1,000 species crowded the floating market platforms, their voices blending into a constant hum of commerce. Tentacled merchants haggled with crystalline brokers over vials of exotic biochemical compounds. Neural stimulants from the Rigel system changed hands for fortunes, while pheromone extracts from the pleasure worlds of Lyria sold faster than water on a desert planet. Dr. Elias Carter adjusted the collar of his frayed lab coat as he wiped dust from his modest stall. The sign above it flickered intermittently, the holographic letters struggling to maintain coherence. Homo sapiens, emotional extract, limited stock. A single rack of vials stood on display, each containing a faint golden liquid that shimmered when tilted. A passing group of Zarathi merchants clicked their mandibles in amusement, their chitinous plates shifting colors in patterns Elias had learned meant derision. He ignored them, focusing instead on the datapad in his hands, shipment logs, inventory, the dwindling credits in his account. Then the crowd parted. Vexlith, a high-ranking Zarathi broker, slithered forward, his segmented body undulating across the platform, his 4 primary limbs folded in what passed for a relaxed stance among his kind, still peddling this hope. His voice was a dry rasp, the translator implant in his throat, struggling with the Zorathis natural harmonics. Elias didn't look up. Still buying, Vexlith's plates rippled with deep violet amusement. A weak human delusion. The Federation has no use for emotional placebos. He tapped one clawed digit against a vial, watching the liquid swirl. Your species clings to it because you lack the biological resilience of true warriors. Elias finally met his gaze. Funny, last I checked. Zarathi fleets lost 3 systems to the Vorak last cycle. How's logic working out for you? The Zarathis plates flared crimson, anger. A nearby cluster of Krellian cadets turned, their elongated ears twitching with interest. Vexlith leaned in, his breath carrying the acrid scent of sulfur. Your insolence is as predictable as your weakness. Hope is a crutch for species too frail to face reality. Elias smirked. And yet, here you are, talking to me. Before Vexlith could retort, a shadow fell over the stall. A massive figure loomed, its presence silencing the nearby chatter. The Vorak syndicate buyer stood nearly 3 meters tall, his obsidian exoskeleton etched with glyphs of conquest. Twin rows of needle, teeth glistened as he spoke, his voice a bass growl that bypassed translation. This is the human emotion extract. Elias forced his hands steady. That's right, pure HFY direct neural distillation. The Vorak's faceted eyes gleamed as he lifted a vial, tilting it so the golden liquid caught the nebula's light. We have studied your kind. Your soldiers continue fighting even when outnumbered, even when dying. He turned the vial slowly. This is the cause. Vexlith hissed. Do not waste your credits, Craxthal. Human hope is a myth, a chemical mirage. Craxthal ignored him. His gaze locked on Elias. We will take your stock, all of it. Elias exhaled. Had known this moment would come. The syndicate had been circling for weeks, probing, testing. Now they were ready to buy. It's not cheap. The Vorak warlord let out a sound like grinding stone laughter. We do not pay in credits, human. A data slate slid across the counter, displaying a sum that made Elias' stomach tighten. We pay in fear. The nearby merchants had gone still. Even Vexlith took a step back, his plates dulling to a wary grey. Elias stared at the number. It was more than enough. Enough to buy passage off this rock, enough to disappear. He reached under the counter and pulled out the last crate. 12 vials, the final harvest. Craxthal's claw closed around them. A transaction well made. As the Vorak turned to leave, Vexlith found his voice. You waste your resources, Craxthal. Hope is nothing but a... The warlord didn't stop walking. You are wrong, Zarathi. His voice carried across the silent bazaar. We do not buy this to understand them. The crowd parted before him like water before a blade. We buy it to break them. Elias watched the syndicate entourage vanish into the throng. His hands didn't shake, his breath didn't hitch. But for the first time in years, he allowed himself to smile, because the Vorak had just made one fatal mistake. They thought hope was something you could sell. They didn't realize it was something you weaponized. The amphitheater hummed with the chatter of 100 alien cadets, their varied forms casting strange shadows under the holographic battle projections. Lieutenant Mara Vasquez sat rigid in her seat, the only human in the Galactic Tactical Institute's Advanced Tactics course. Her fingers dug into the armrests as the Krellian instructor, Dvorak, flicked a tentacle toward the latest simulation. Observe, Dvorak intoned, his voice a grating buzz. The hologram shimmered to life, a human fleet, outdated by galactic standards, facing the sleek, disciplined ships of the Zarathi Armada. The so-called Terra Concord attempts a frontal assault predictable. Laughter rippled through the amphitheater. A reptilian Scythian cadet leaned over, his tongue flicking. Soft skins and their hopeful charges, like insects hurling themselves at stars. Mara kept her eyes forward. She'd seen this before. The simulation played out exactly as expected. Human ships broke formation, their railgun salvos bouncing harmlessly off Zarathi shields. One by one, they were picked apart. The Vorak paused the hologram at the moment of total human annihilation. This is what happens when a species clings to emotion over logic. The humans believed they could win. A fatal flaw. A cerulean cadet, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with amusement, raised a delicate hand. Instructor, why even include them in our studies? They're barely spacefaring. Because, Dvorak said, mandibles clicking, the Federation insists we understand all potential threats, even the quaint ones. Mara's jaw tightened. She'd spent 6 months here, enduring the sidelong glances, the whispered insults. Soft skin, fragile, hopeful, like it was a disease. Dvorak reactivated the hologram. Now, compare this to the Battle of Zentha Prime. The Krellian 7th Fleet utilized pure tactical calculus. No wasted energy on morale or belief. The hologram shifted, showing Krellian ships executing flawless maneuvers. Mara barely glanced at it. Her eyes were fixed on the frozen image of the dying human fleet. Then the simulation glitched, the hologram flickered, the human ships suddenly moving again, but not as they had before. They weren't breaking. They were adapting. A crippled cruiser spun its wreckage into the path of a Zarathi destroyer. A squadron of fighters, written off as lost, emerged from a debris field, their railguns firing in perfect sync. The amphitheater fell silent. Dvorak's tentacles stiffened. This is an error. The human fleet was destroyed. But the simulation kept going. The Zarathi lines wavered. A dreadnought's shield flickered, then failed. The hologram zoomed in on a single human battleship, its hull scorched, its engines dead. It fired one last salvo before the Zarathi obliterated it. The shot hit. A Zarathi command ship exploded. The simulation froze again. Mara stood. Every alien eye turned to her. She didn't care. That wasn't an error, she said, her voice quiet but sharp. That's history. Dvorak's carapace darkened. Cadet Vasquez. Sit down. This is a malfunction. It's the Battle of Proxima Centauri, Mara interrupted. Earth's 3rd Fleet, outnumbered 10-1. They knew they'd lose, but they took down the Zarathi flagship anyway. The Scythian sneered. A fluke. One ship doesn't win a war. Mara turned to him. No, but it buys time for the next fleet. And the next, that's what you don't understand. Hope isn't delusion, it's ammunition. Dvorak slammed a tentacle on the console, shutting off the hologram. Enough human emotionalism has no place in real strategy. Cadet Vasquez, report to disciplinary. The doors hissed open. A comms officer, a nervous-looking Octavian, hurried in. Instructor Dvorak, priority alert. The Dvorak Syndicate has attacked the Orion trade hub. They're using... The Octavian hesitated. They're using human prisoners to test something, some kind of biochemical weapon. Mara's blood went cold. Dvorak flicked his antennae dismissively. The Dvorak are barbarians, but this is irrelevant too. The prisoners aren't breaking, the Octavian blurted. Dvorak expected despair. Instead, the humans are fighting back. They're calling it the hope contagion. Silence. Mara didn't wait for dismissal. She strode for the exit, her boots echoing in the sudden quiet. Behind her, the Scythian muttered, "Where's she going? It's not like she can do anything." Mara didn't turn around. "Watch me." The doors slid shut behind her. The Academy's halls, usually bustling, felt empty. Her wrist comm buzzed, a priority message from Earth Command. She opened it, a single line. "Lieutenant Vasquez, you are recalled to active duty. The Dvorak just made their last mistake." Mara smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. She broke into a run. The auction hall stank of ozone and desperation. Flickering holosigns cast sickly green light over the gathered aliens. Dvorak warlords in their jagged armor, Zorathi brokers with their chittering mandibles, even a few Krellian observers standing rigid at the back. Elias Carter adjusted his respirator, the only human in a room full of predators. His stall was smaller than the others, just a single table with 12 vials of amber liquid glowing under stasis fields. The label read HFY Hope, pure Homo sapiens neurotransmitter extract. A Dvorak enforcer shoved through the crowd, his carapace scraping against a Zorathi merchant. "Move, leech," the warrior growled, his voice like grinding bones. The merchant skittered aside, his antennae flattening in submission. Elias didn't flinch as the Dvorak loomed over his table. Up close, he could see the scars where the alien's exoskeleton had been reforged after battle. "Soft skin," the Dvorak sneered. "You really think this weakness is worth our time?" Elias kept his voice steady. "Bid, and find out." A ripple of alien laughter echoed through the hall across the room. Vexlith raised a manipulator limb in mock salute. "Still peddling fairy tales, Carter. Hope won't fill your coffers." The auctioneer, a floating cerulean orb, pulsed with impatience. "Lot Fey, human emotional extract starting bid. Fey Galactic credits." Silence. Then from the shadows, a voice like oil on broken glass. Fey. The crowd parted as Overlord Craxthul emerged. His carapace was blackened from 1,000 battles, his 4 eyes burning with cold amusement. The Dvorak warlord didn't walk. He flowed, his movements too smooth for something so massive. Elias' throat went dry. Fey, countered a Zorathi broker, his mandibles clicking nervously. Craxthul didn't even glance at him. Fey. The broker hesitated, then bowed his head. No one else dared to bid the Cerelion pulsed green, sold to the Dvorak Syndicate. Craxthul's lieutenant, a spindly creature with too many joints, scuttled forward to collect the vials. Its claws hovered over the stasis field, then jerked back as if burned. "Master, the resonance is wrong?" The warlord chuckled. "Of course it is. That's why we want it." He turned to Elias, his smile revealing needle, like teeth. "Tell me, soft skin, what happens when we inject your hope into our enemies?" Elias met his gaze. "You'll find out." Craxthul leaned in, his breath reeking of rotting meat. "We won't just use it, human well rent it. Let your species' weakness seep into their veins, and when they break..." He straightened, his carapace creaking. Well, return the despair to you tenfold. The vials disappeared into a reinforced case, locked with a biometric seal. Elias watched as Craxthel's entourage marched toward the exit, the crowd shrinking back. The warlord paused at the door, his voice carrying across the silent hall. Enjoy your credits, Carter. They're the last thing your kind will ever earn. The door hissed shut behind him. Vexlith slithered closer, his chitinous plates rattling with laughter. You actually thought they'd study it. The Vorak don't dissect weapons. They fire them. Elias didn't answer. He was already typing a coded message into his wristcom. 3 words, they took the bait. Outside, the Soul Harvester's engines flared to life, its jagged silhouette blotting out the stars. The vials sat in its hold, innocuous, waiting, and deep in the ship's labs, the first human POWs stirred in their cells, their wrists raw from shackles. Sergeant Jake Morrison looked up as the door hissed open. A Vorak scientist loomed over him, a syringe filled with amber liquid glinting in the dim light. Time to see how soft you really are, the alien hissed. Jake grinned. Oh, you have no idea. The needle plunged in. The Vorak laboratory ship Soul Harvester hung in the void, like a bloated corpse, its spiked hull bristling with syringes the size of skyscrapers. Inside the sterile torture chambers, Sergeant Jake Morrison spat blood onto the polished black floor. His ribs ached where the Vorak shock prods had found their mark, but his grin never wavered. Around him, 12 other human prisoners stood shackled to neural monitors, their vitals flashing across holographic displays. A Vorak scientist, all clicking mandibles and needle, thin fingers, adjusted a console with precise clinical movements. Commencing HFY infusion, it hissed to its companion. Prepare to record psychological collapse parameters. Jake watched as the first injection arm descended toward Private Chen's neck. The young soldier's breath hitched, but he locked eyes with Jake. Remember the drill, kid, Jake muttered. Chen nodded once. Jaw set, the needle plunged. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the Vorak scientist's ocular stalks twitched in confusion. Anomaly detected, it rasped. Subject's endorphin levels are increasing. Chen's monitor spiked from yellow to blazing red. His pupils dilated, his breathing steadied. When he laughed, it wasn't the broken sound the Vorak expected. It was dark, hungry. Oh, you idiot bugs. Chen whispered. You think hope is something you can inject? Jake's own injection came next. The cold rush of HFY hit his bloodstream like a lightning strike. Memories flooded him. Boot camp on Mars. His sister's laugh before the Vorak glassed her colony. The weight of his first rifle. Not despair. Purpose. The Vorak scientist recoiled as Jake's neural readouts erupted in violent crimson. Impossible. Their cortisol levels should be crashing. The despair cascade should. Jake snapped his restraints like dry twigs. The sound echoed through the chamber. Let me explain something, he said, rolling his shoulders. You wanted to rent hope. Fine, but hope's got a fucking interest rate. Alarms blared as the other prisoners' monitors flatlined, not from death, but from signals too intense for Vorak sensors to process. Private Chen tore free next, his fist connecting with a guard's thorax in a wet crunch. The lead scientist scrambled backward, frantically inputting commands. Containment breach, deploy suppress. Jake grabbed its spindly wrist. Suppress this. He drove his forehead into the creature's primary eye cluster. Chitin shattered. Across the lab, the other humans were rising. Not broken, not despairing, enraged. A Vorak guard lunged at Private Ruiz with a shock prod, only for her to catch the weapon mid-swing and twist it into the alien's thorax. You don't give us hope, she snarled. We make it. Jake snatched a fallen plasma cutter from the floor. The weapon hummed to life in his grip, casting blue light across the carnage. Listen up, maggots, he barked to his squad. We're taking this fucking barge. Then we're gonna find every last vial of that HFY, and we're gonna mail it back to those Vorak warlords, one syringe at a time. The humans moved as one, a blur of fists, stolen weapons, and borrowed fury. The Vorak had expected them to break, to crumble under the weight of their own emotions. Instead, Dead unleashed something far worse. A human with nothing left to lose. The USN Defiance tore through the void, her battered hull still smoking from the last engagement. Captain Lisa Hayes gripped the command rail as the tactical display flickered to life. Red markers swarmed the screen. Vorak destroyers, Zorathi cruisers, the massive soul harvester looming like a nightmare at the center of it all. "Status," she barked. "Shields at Faye, ma'am," Ensign Cho reported, fingers flying over his console. Railguns charged, but were down to 3 torpedo bays. Lisa's eyes locked on the soul harvester. The dreadnought's bio, organic plating pulsed as it pumped HFY into the battlefield. A sickly green mist spreading toward the human POW ships. Open fleet. Wide channel. Static crackled. Then her voice boomed across every human vessel still fighting. "This is Captain Hayes. All ships, remember Earth." Aboard the soul harvester, Sergeant Jake Morrison wiped blood from his lip. The Vorak had dragged him and his squad into the dreadnought's belly. Needles jammed into their veins, pumping them full of HFY-like lab rats. "Pathetic," hissed the Vorak scientist monitoring their vitals. "Your hope will crumble, then we'll see what makes your species break." Jake's squad groaned as the compound hit their systems. Private Chen gasped, her pupils dilating. Then she laughed. The Vorak scientist's cranial spines twitched. "Impossible. Your cortisol levels should be," Jake grinned. His heartbeat steadied, his vision sharpened. The pain in his ribs faded to a dull throb. "You dumb bugs," he spat. "Hope isn't a drug, it's a weapon." Outside, the Defiance's railguns roared. A Vorak frigate exploded, debris spiraling into the soul harvester's shields. "Captain," shouted Ensign Cho, "we've got an incoming signal. It's Lieutenant Vasquez." Lisa's breath caught. Mara Vasquez had been Mia since the Krellian Academy fell. The comms crackled. "Defiance. This is Vasquez. Stole a Krellian cruiser. Tell me you've got a plan." Lisa's lips curled. "Welcome back, Lieutenant. Ever rammed a dreadnought?" A pause, then Mara's voice cold and certain. "Give me the vector." The Defiance's engines flared as Lisa swung the ship into a flanking run. Vorak interceptors screeched toward them, plasma cannons overheating space. "Cho, divert all power to forward shields." The Defiance shuddered as green fire splashed across her bow. Alarms wailed. Shields failing. Lisa didn't flinch. "Mara, now." From the edge of the battlefield, the stolen Krellian cruiser, its hull stripped of insignia, its engines burning white-hot, plunged toward the soul harvester aboard the cruiser. Mara's hands clenched the controls. The Krellian AI screamed warnings in her ear. Collision imminent, evasive action required. She silenced it with a fist to the console. The soul harvester's anti-fighter turrets spun up, streams of bioacid rounds tearing through space. Mara weaved, the cruiser's wings shearing off as she closed the distance. Fey meters, the Vorak overlord Kraxthal's face filled the dreadnought's viewport, his needle, teeth bared in fury. Mara smiled. The cruiser slammed into the soul harvester's main reactor housing. For a heartbeat, nothing. The HFY stockpile detonated in a psychic shockwave. A pulse of pure, unfiltered human hope ripped through the Vorak fleet. On the Defiance's bridge, Lisa watched as Vorak ships listed drunkenly, their crews clawing at their heads. Zorathi vessels broke formation, their crystalline pilots shattering under the mental backlash. Jake's voice crackled over the comms, breathless. "Captain, you seeing this?" Lisa exhaled. "I am, Sergeant." The tide had turned across the battlefield, Human ships, outnumbered, outgunned, refused to rout. Frigates missing entire decks still fired. Fighters with one wing still dove. The Defiance's railguns cycled again and again and again. And through every open channel, from every surviving human ship, the same words thundered, "Remember Earth." The chant wasn't a plea, it was a promise. The Vorak fleet shuddered as the psychic shockwave ripped through their formation. Kraxthal's command throne cracked under his grip, his needle teeth bared in a snarl. "Report," he demanded, his voice echoing through the Soul Harvester's bridge. The Vorak science officer writhed, his chitinous plates rattling. "Overlord, the HFY, it's not suppressing them. It's..." His voice cut off as his claws scraped at his own skull. "It burns." On the battlefield below, Sergeant Jake Morrison's squad erupted into motion. Their movements were sharp, precise, as if the hope the Vorak had pumped into their veins had sharpened their reflexes instead of breaking them. Jake's rifle barked, punching through a Vorak soldier's chest. "You wanted to see what hope does." He yelled over the chaos, "Here's your damn demo." Aboard the USN Defiance, Captain Lisa Hayes watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Vorak ships were listing, their formations crumbling as their crews succumbed to the backlash. "All ships," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of a hammer strike. "Advance, no quarter." The human fleet surged forward, railguns glowing hot as they cut through the disoriented Vorak lines. The Defiance's main battery roared, shearing the Soul Harvester's starboard flank open in a shower of molten debris. Inside the dying dreadnought, Kraxthal staggered as the deck tilted beneath him. His screens flickered, showing the same nightmare on every ship in his armada. Vorak warriors clawing at their heads, their minds drowning in a tide of foreign emotion. "This is impossible," he snarled. "Humans are weak. Their hope is a flaw." Dr. Elias Carter's voice crackled over the Defiance's comms, laced with cold amusement. "You thought hope was just a chemical, Kraxthal, something to be bottled, sold, weaponized, but you forgot one thing." The Vorak Overlord's screen flickered again, this time showing Elias' face smiling, but with eyes like ice. "Hope isn't just a feeling. It's what happens when we refuse to lose." Kraxthal's roar of fury was cut short as the Soul Harvester's core breached. The explosion rippled outward, a chain reaction tearing through the Vorak fleet like wildfire. On the bridge of a stolen Krellian cruiser, Lieutenant Mara Vasquez watched the carnage with a predator's grin. Her hands danced over the controls, guiding the ship through the wreckage. "That's for calling us weak," she muttered. The Zarathi armada, hovering at the edge of the battle, hesitated. Their admiral, Vexlith, stared at the screens in disbelief. The humans were winning, not through superior numbers or technology, but through sheer unbreakable will. "Admiral," his tactical officer hissed, "the human fleet. They're turning toward us." Vexlith's mandibles clicked in alarm. Retreat, full withdrawal. But it was too late. The Defiance locked onto the Zarathi flagship, its railguns humming with lethal intent. Captain Hayes' voice cut through the silence. "You wanted to see what hope could do, Vexlith. Watch closely." The Zarathi admiral had just enough time to see the human fleet's comms light up with a single repeating phrase. "Remember Earth," before the Defiance fired. The Vorak weren't the only ones who learned the price of underestimating humanity that day. As the last of the enemy ships fled, Jake Morrison leaned against a broken Vorak barricade, breathing hard. His squad gathered around him, their faces streaked with dirt and blood, but their eyes alight with something unshakable. One of his privates, a kid barely out of basic, grinned up at him. "Sarge, did we just win?" Jake laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Nah, kid, we just sent the bill." Aboard the Defiance, Elias watched the battlefield fade into the distance. The Vorak had come to rent hope. Now they'd pay for it in despair. The council chamber doors exploded inward. Smoke curled around the boots of Captain Lisa Hayes as she stepped through the wreckage. Behind her, the surviving crew of the Defiance fanned out, rifles humming with fresh charge. The air smelled of scorched metal and alien fear. Delegates from a dozen species recoiled. The Zarathi delegation's chitinous plates clattered like dry leaves in a storm. Vexislith, who had once mocked Elias's stall, now pressed himself against the wall, his antennae trembling. Hayes didn't look at them. She walked straight to the central dais, where the Vorak overlord's throne still smoldered from the orbital strike. Her gloved hand reached into her vest. The chamber held its breath. Then clink, a single vial of HFY rolled across the polished obsidian table, coming to rest in front of the cowering Krellian ambassador. "Next time you want hope," Hayes said, her voice quiet as a knife leaving its sheath, "you'll beg for it." Silence, the kind that comes before a storm. Then movement. Mara Vasquez limped into the chamber, her stolen Krellian officer's cloak torn and streaked with plasma burns. She leaned against the doorway, breathing hard. One hand clutched her ribs, the other held a sidearm, still warm. The Ceralian delegate's floating orbs pulsed violet with distress. You can't just..." "We can," Mara interrupted. She spat blood onto the floor. "You made us prove it." Elias Carter stepped forward then, his lab coat replaced with a Marine's tactical vest. He looked older, sharper, like a man who'd finally stopped bargaining. His eyes locked onto Vexlith. "Remember when you called hope a weak human delusion?" Elias asked. He didn't wait for an answer. He tapped the vial. "Turns out, it is corrosive. Eats through despair like acid. Funny thing, your kind doesn't have the neural architecture to process it, like drinking poison." A Vorak lieutenant, his carapace cracked and leaking green ichor, suddenly convulsed. His claws scraped at his skull as he collapsed. The other delegates flinched. Hayes didn't blink. The Soul Harvester's wreckage is still broadcasting. Every Vorak ship that got a whiff of our weakness is now a tomb. She leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "You wanted to rent hope, fine. But despair comes free with every purchase." High above, through the shattered dome of the council chamber, the stars burned cold and bright. Human ships, patched, battered, but unbroken, drifted in formation. Their railgun batteries hummed, charged and ready. The Krellian ambassador's vocal sac deflated. What are your terms?" Mara laughed, a raw, exhausted sound. "Terms? You don't get to ask for terms, not after the burning." Hayes straightened. "Earth's gone, our colonies are ash. You thought that broke us." She gestured to the fleet above. All it did was piss us off. Elias picked up the vial, held it to the light. The golden liquid inside shimmered. "You study war. You quantify it, simulate it, trade it like currency." He smiled. "It wasn't friendly, but you never understood it." "Not really." A shadow passed over the chamber. The Defiance's prow eclipsed the nearest star, casting the room into twilight. "War isn't about resources," Hayes said, "or territory, or even survival." She turned to leave. "It is about who is left standing when the dust settles." Mara pushed off the wall, holstered her pistol. "And guess what?" She grinned, bloody and bright. "Rents paid in full." The human fleet jumped to warp behind them. The council chamber erupted into chaos. But no one laughed at hope anymore.